When my son chose to believe her instead of me, I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. I had given everything for that boy. Every dream of mine was shaped around his happiness. And now he stood there, eyes cold as stone, telling me I was selfish, that I wanted everything just for myself. My daughter-in-law's words echoed through the room like sweet poison, and I watched my own blood turn against me. In that moment, I realized that a mother's love can be the most fragile thing in the world when someone decides to break it. I didn't know it yet, but what he would do next wouldn't just be a betrayal. It would be the end of everything I believed about family, loyalty, and what it means to be a mother. And when I discovered the truth, it was already too late to go back. If you love emotional stories like this, please subscribe to our channel and tell me in the comments if something like this has ever happened to you. I raised my son alone. His father left when he was just 3 years old, disappeared into the night with promises that never came true, and I was left holding a crying child who kept asking when daddy would come home. I never remarried. I poured everything into that boy, every ounce of strength I had, every dollar I earned working double shifts at the hospital, every dream I ever had for myself. I watched him grow from a shy little boy into a strong, kind man, and I felt proud in a way that words could never capture. We had our own language, our own rituals. Sunday mornings were ours. Pancakes and coffee on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. He would tell me about his week, his plans, his fears, and I would listen like my life depended on it because in many ways it did. He was my purpose, my reason for waking up every morning even when my body ached and my heart felt heavy. When he graduated college, I cried harder than he did. When he got his first real job, I framed his business card and hung it on my wall. I was that kind of mother, the kind who loved too much, who gave too freely, who believed that sacrifice was just another word for love. And for years, it worked. We were happy, just the two of us against the world. Then he met her. I still remember the day he brought her home, her smile too perfect, her words too sweet, her eyes measuring everything in my small house like she was already planning how to rearrange it. I tried to like her, I really did. I smiled when she criticized my cooking, laughed when she made jokes about my old-fashioned furniture, nodded when she talked about how much better things would be once they were married. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just afraid of losing my son, that every mother feels this way when her child finds someone new. But deep in my chest, something whispered that this woman would take everything from me. I just didn't know how right I was.
The wedding was beautiful. I won't lie about that. I paid for most of it. The flowers, the venue, the dress she chose that cost more than 3 months of my salary. My son asked me, with those eyes I could never say no to, and I opened my savings account, the one I had been building for my retirement, the one that was supposed to take me somewhere warm when my bones got too tired for these cold winters. I handed over the money with a smile, because that's what mothers do, right? We give until there's nothing left to give, and then we find something else to offer. After they married, things changed faster than I expected. The Sunday breakfast stopped. He would call, promise to come by, then cancel at the last minute. She needed him for something, always something urgent, always something more important than his mother. I understood, or at least I tried to. Newlyweds need their space, their time to build their life together. I stepped back, gave them room to breathe, waited patiently for the moment when he would remember me again. Then came the day that shattered everything. I was at home, watering my plants, the ones my son had given me over the years for birthdays and Mother's Days, when my phone rang. It was him, but his voice was different, cold and distant. like he was talking to a stranger. He said we needed to meet, that there was something important to discuss. My heart jumped, thinking maybe they had good news. Maybe a grandchild was coming. Maybe things would finally get better. I dressed carefully, wore the blue blouse he always said looked nice on me, and drove to their house with hope fluttering in my chest like a desperate bird. But when I arrived and saw her face, that smile that didn't reach her eyes, I knew something terrible was about to happen. They sat me down in their living room. My son wouldn't look me directly, and she began to talk. Her words were carefully chosen, delivered with fake concern, but the message was clear as glass. She said I was too dependent on my son, that I was holding him back, that I wanted to control every aspect of his life. She said I had always tried to keep everything for myself, his time, his money, his attention, and that it needed to stop. I sat there, frozen, waiting for him to defend me, to tell her she was wrong, to remember all those years when it was just us against the world. But he didn't. He just nodded slowly, like everything she said was true, like I was some kind of burden he had been carrying all his life. That's when my heart began to break. Slowly at first, then all at once.
I tried to speak, but my voice came out broken, barely a whisper. I asked him if he really believed what she was saying, if he truly thought I had been selfish all these years. He looked at me then, finally, but his eyes were empty, like he was looking through me instead of at me. He said that maybe it was time for me to build my own life, to stop depending on him for happiness, to let him be his own person. Each word felt like a knife sliding between my ribs, slow and deliberate. I wanted to scream, to remind him of every sacrifice, every missed opportunity, every dream I had buried so he could chase his own. But the words stuck in my throat like stones. She sat there watching me, her hand resting possessively on his knee, and I realized this had been her plan all along. She hadn't just married my son. She had declared war on me, and somehow she had already won. I left their house in a daze, my hand shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in my car. I drove home through blurred vision, tears streaming down my face, my chest so tight I thought I might die right there on the highway. When I got home, I collapsed on my kitchen floor, the same floor where I had taught my son to tie his shoes, where we had baked cookies together on rainy afternoons, where he had hugged me tight and promised he would always take care of me. The silence in my house was deafening. For the first time in decades, I felt completely alone. The phone didn't ring. He didn't call to apologize, to explain, to tell me it was all a misunderstanding. Days turned into weeks, and the silence grew heavier, more suffocating. I stopped sleeping well, stopped eating properly, stopped caring about the little things that used to matter. My coworkers noticed, asked if I was okay. But how could I explain that my own son had chosen a woman he barely knew over the mother who had given him everything? I became a ghost in my own life, going through the motions but feeling nothing, empty as a shell washed up on shore. Then one afternoon, while cleaning out my closet, trying to distract myself from the pain, I found an old box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were letters, photographs, documents from when my son was young. And at the bottom, beneath layers of memories, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a letter from my ex-husband, dated just 2 years ago, addressed to my son. My hands trembled as I unfolded it.
What I read in those pages would change everything I thought I knew.
The letter was written in my ex-husband's handwriting, shaky and uncertain, like he had been drinking when he wrote it. He said he was dying, that he had maybe 6 months left, and that he needed to tell our son the truth before it was too late. He wrote about money, lots of money, an inheritance from his father that he had hidden from me during our divorce, money that should have been split between us, money that could have changed our lives completely. But that wasn't the worst part. He wrote that he had contacted our son 2 years ago, that they had been meeting in secret, that he had promised to leave everything to him when he died. He said our son deserved it, that I had poisoned his childhood with my bitterness, that it was time for the boy to finally have a real father figure in his life. My hand shook so violently. The paper rustled like dead leaves. My son had known about this for 2 years? 2 years of Sunday breakfast where he smiled and laughed and never mentioned that he was secretly meeting the man who abandoned us? 2 years of lies, hidden behind every hug, every "I love you, Mom," every promise that we would always be close? I felt sick, dizzy, like the room was spinning around me. But there was more. At the end of the letter, my ex-husband mentioned her, my daughter-in-law, said he had met her too, that she was smart, ambitious, perfect for our son, and that together they would know exactly what to do with the money when the time came. The pieces started falling into place like dominoes, each one knocking down another truth I had believed in. She hadn't just appeared in my son's life by accident. She had been part of this plan all along, brought in by my ex-husband, groomed to help my son get everything while pushing me completely out of the picture. The wedding, the distance, the accusations. It was all calculated. Every move designed to isolate me, to make me look like the problem, to justify cutting me out completely. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by old photographs and letters. My entire life scattered around me like broken pieces of a puzzle I no longer recognized. How long had they been planning this? How many times had my son sat across from me, eating the food I cooked, accepting the money I gave him, while secretly plotting with the father who destroyed us? I wanted to confront him immediately, to throw the letter in his face and demand answers. But something stopped me. A small voice in my head that whispered, I needed to know more first, that there was still something missing from this ugly picture. That's when I remembered the lawyer. 3 months before the wedding, my son had asked me to sign some papers. He said it was just a formality, something about being a witness for a property document, nothing important. I had been so happy that he needed me for something, so grateful that he had come to visit, that I signed without reading carefully. I trusted him completely, the way only a mother can trust her child. Now, sitting in my bedroom, with that letter burning in my hands, I remembered the lawyer's office, the thick stack of papers, my son's nervous energy, the way he kept checking his phone. I had thought he was just busy, stressed about the wedding planning. I never imagined he was anxious about what he was making me sign. The next morning, I called that lawyer's office. I gave them my name, said I needed copies of the documents I had signed, that I had lost my originals. The secretary was hesitant at first, but when I mentioned my son's name, she softened, said she would check with her boss. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at my house. Inside were copies of everything I had signed. And there it was, hitting in legal language I had been too trusting to question. I hadn't witnessed a property document. I had signed away my rights to any claim on my ex-husband's estate. The paper stated that I acknowledged receiving my fair share during the divorce, that I had no further financial claims on him or his assets, and that I waived any right to contest his will. My signature was right there at the bottom, clear as day, sealing my own fate. I had helped them rob me. My own son had manipulated me into giving up money that was legally mine, money that could have saved me from working until my body gave out, money that could have given me the peaceful retirement I had dreamed about during all those double shifts and sleepless nights. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. This wasn't just about money. This was about my son looking me in the eyes, knowing exactly what he was doing, and choosing to destroy me anyway. I spent 3 days barely moving from my couch, staring at those papers, trying to understand how the little boy I had raised could become this person. But on the 4th day, something changed inside me. The grief began to harden into something else, something cold and sharp and focused. I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. I hired a private investigator. I know it sounds dramatic, like something from a movie, but I needed to know the full truth, every detail they had been hiding from me. I gave him the letter, the legal documents, explained everything that had happened. He listened carefully, took notes, and promised to dig deeper. What he found 2 weeks later shattered everything I thought I understood. My ex-husband had died 8 months ago. 8 months. And my son never told me. He had attended the funeral, collected the inheritance, divided everything with his wife, and never said a single word to me about it. But that wasn't the revelation that broke me. The investigator showed me bank records, property deeds, investment accounts. My ex-husband had been wealthy, far wealthier than I ever imagined. The inheritance my son received was close to $2 million. $2 million that should have been partly mine. That could have changed my entire life. I stared at those numbers until they blurred together, trying to comprehend that level of betrayal. But then the investigator showed me something else, something he said I needed to see, even though it would hurt. He pulled out photographs from social media, posts my son and his wife had made over the past months. Pictures of them in Europe, luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, designer clothes. They had been living like royalty while I struggled to pay my electric bill. In one photo, my daughter-in-law wore a necklace that probably cost more than my car, smiling brilliantly at the camera. The caption read, "Finally living the life we deserve." The life they deserved. Those words echoed in my head like poison. But what destroyed me completely was the last thing the investigator showed me. He had found emails between my son and his wife, messages they had exchanged before they even got married. In those messages, she laid out the entire plan, step by step, exactly how they would isolate me, manipulate me, get me to sign away my rights. And my son, my baby boy, had agreed to everything enthusiastically. He had even suggested they speed up the wedding, get the money faster, cut me out completely before I could figure anything out. In one email she wrote, "Your mother is too stupid to see what's coming. By the time she realizes, we'll be set for life." And he had responded with a laughing emoji. A laughing emoji. They had laughed about destroying me. That's when something inside me died completely. And something else was born, something harder, colder, more determined than I had ever been in my life. I finally understood that I wasn't fighting for my son's love anymore. I was fighting for justice. I went back to that lawyer, the one who had helped my son steal from me. But this time, I brought my own attorney, a sharp woman with ice in her eyes, who specialized in estate law and fraud. We sat across from him in his expensive office, and I watched his face change as my lawyer laid out everything we had discovered. The documents I signed were obtained under false pretenses, she explained calmly. My client was deliberately misled about the nature of what she was signing, which constitutes fraud.
Furthermore, the estate was settled without proper notification to all potential heirs, which violated state law. His confidence crumbled like old paper. He tried to defend himself that he had only done what his client requested, that he had no knowledge of any deception. My lawyer smiled coldly and slid a recording device across his desk. The investigator had found a voicemail my son left him, explicitly instructing him to keep the language vague, to make sure I didn't understand what I was really signing. The lawyer's face went pale. He knew he could lose his license, face criminal charges, spend years in court fighting allegations that would destroy his reputation. My attorney gave him a choice. He could cooperate with us, provide testimony about what really happened, help us build our case, or he could stand by my son and face the consequences when everything came to light. He chose survival. Within a week, he had provided sworn statements, copies of all communications with my son, evidence of the manipulation and fraud. It wasn't enough to guarantee we would win, but it was a start, a crack in the armor they had built around their stolen fortune. Meanwhile, I did something I had never done before. I started taking care of myself. I stopped crying, stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world, stopped believing that a mother's love meant accepting abuse with a smile. I started seeing a therapist who helped me understand that what my son did wasn't my failure as a mother, it was his failure as a human being. I joined a gym, not to look younger or more attractive, but because I needed to feel strong again, needed to remember that my body was capable of fighting back. I changed my will, removed my son completely, left everything to a scholarship fund for single mothers trying to finish their education. If he wanted to erase me from his life, I could erase him from mine too.
Then came the day I confronted him. I didn't plan it, didn't rehearse what I would say. I simply showed up at his house, walked past his wife who tried to block the door, and stood in his living room holding all the evidence in my hands. He looked shocked to see me. Started to say something about how I should have called first, but I cut him off. I asked him one simple question. Did you laugh when you stole from me? His face went white. I watched him search for words, for excuses, for some way to explain away what he had done. But there was nothing he could say, no lie big enough to cover the truth. I laid the emails on his coffee table, the bank records, the lawyer's testimony, everything. I told him I knew about his father's death, about the inheritance, about every lie he had told, every manipulation, every moment he had smiled at me while planning my destruction. His wife tried to intervene, started saying I was crazy, that I was making things up. But I looked at her with such cold fury that she actually stepped back. I told them both that I had filed a lawsuit, that I was contesting the estate, that their lawyer was cooperating with my legal team, that every dollar they spent from that stolen money was being documented. But more than that, I told him something that made his eyes fill with tears. I said that he hadn't just stolen money from me. He had killed his mother. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. The woman who raised him, who sacrificed everything, who loved him more than life itself, that woman was dead now, destroyed by his greed and cruelty. And standing in her place was someone he would never know, someone who would never forgive him, someone who would spend every remaining day of her life making sure he understood exactly what he had lost. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that looked almost like regret, almost like a recognition of what he had done. But it was too late, far too late. I turned and walked out of that house, and I never looked back. The legal battle took 18 months. 18 months of depositions, court appearances, lawyers arguing over documents and intent and what constitutes fraud.
My son fought back at first, hired expensive attorneys with the money he had stolen, tried to paint me as a bitter ex-wife seeking revenge. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the recordings, the lawyer's testimony, it all pointed to deliberate deception and manipulation. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Not for everything. The law is complicated, and my ex-husband had structured things carefully. But for enough. I received a settlement of $400,000, plus legal fees, plus a formal acknowledgement that I had been defrauded. It wasn't the full amount I deserved, but it was justice. And sometimes justice is worth more than money. My son lost more than just the lawsuit. His wife left him 3 months after the verdict, took half of what remained, and disappeared with a man she had apparently been seeing on the side. Turned out she had only wanted the money too, and once it started disappearing into legal fees and settlements, so did her love. He tried to contact me after she left, sent messages saying he was sorry, that he had made terrible mistakes, that he needed his mother. I read each message once, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. I used part of the settlement to buy a small house near the ocean, something I had dreamed about my entire life but never thought I could afford. I wake up now to the sound of waves, spend my mornings walking on the beach, my afternoons reading books I never had time for, my evenings watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that take my breath away. I'm not lonely, not anymore. I've made friends here, other women with their own stories of survival and reinvention. We laugh together, share meals, support each other through the hard days. I've learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand beside you when your blood relatives walk away. One morning, while walking on the beach, I found a piece of sea glass, worn smooth by years of waves and time. I held it up to the sunlight and watched it glow, transformed by everything that had tried to break it. I put it in my pocket and carried it home. I keep that piece of sea glass on my kitchen windowsill now, next to a small plant that's finally starting to bloom after months of careful attention. Every morning when I make my coffee, I look at both of them and remember that beautiful things can grow from broken pieces, that time and patience can transform even the sharpest pain into something smooth and bearable. People ask me sometimes if I regret having my son, if I wish I had made different choices, lived a different life. The answer is always no. I don't regret loving him, don't regret the sacrifices I made when he was young and innocent and needed me. What I regret is staying blind for too long, believing that unconditional love meant accepting unconditional cruelty. I learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn, that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, even when it tears you apart, even when it means accepting that the person you raised is gone, replaced by someone you no longer recognize. I think about him sometimes, wonder if he ever truly understood what he lost, if he lies awake at night remembering the mother who would have given him everything without him having to steal it. But those thoughts don't hurt anymore. They're just distant echoes, like voices calling from another life I used to live. I've built something new here, something that belongs only to me, something no one can take away or manipulate or destroy. Last week, I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping mothers who are trying to escape bad situations, who are struggling to rebuild their lives from nothing. I listen to their stories, hold their hands when they cry, remind them that they are stronger than they know, that survival is possible, that peace can be found even after the worst betrayal. When I see the gratitude in their eyes, I finally understand what my life was always meant to become. Not just a mother to one ungrateful son, but a reminder to countless women that they deserve better, that they can demand better, that their worth isn't measured by how much they sacrifice, but by how fiercely they protect their own dignity. Some nights I sit on my porch, watching the ocean, listening to the waves crash against the shore with relentless patience, and I feel something I haven't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but something deeper, something more lasting. I feel whole.